Welcome to the podcast. We're so glad to have you. The purpose of the show today is to help you build predictable B2B revenue. And Adam's firm FinStrat has helped founders, over 300 founders, raise over $480 million in VC. So they're legit. They're helping founders out there every day. He just came from a founder call to join us on the show today. And so I want to invite you, those of you who are listening, to book 15 minutes with Adam now, right off the bat. That way you can dive deeper. Long story short, before I tee it up for Adam and ask the first question, context, he runs the revenue team at FinStrat. The two main drivers are helping founders drive revenue and get investment. These are things that they're really dialed in and quite good at. And then I already mentioned sort of the track record of FinStrat. Adam's going to share a little bit of his story, but most importantly, he sees right now in the market with founders like what's working, what's not. And so, Adam, I'm going to kick it over to you right now for
Sure.
founders who are trying to get that first $1 million in revenue in the pipe and closed. What is the number one pattern you've seen founders who are executing at a high level to get that first million in the door?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I'll probably touch on a few different topics here. Um, the first thing I want to hit on is consistent and regular customer feedback and an openness and willingness to listen to that customer feedback, call it the voice of the customer, to make changes, to pivot, right? I think oftentimes what we see, especially at the pre-seed early revenue stages, right, is people have experience in a particular industry. They have a network, right? And they get some really early traction by leveraging, first party connections, maybe second tier connections, right? Um, what we're really trying to see and unlock, and oftentimes that's led by the founder, right? Founder led growth, right? They've got a network from past experience. The real question to growth to get beyond a million, because you can, depending on your industry, get pretty close to your million ARR, whatever the benchmark is with your own individual network. It's how do you scale that beyond that, right? And how do you scale it beyond the dependency on the founder themselves to close those deals? I think that's the classic challenge you see across industries, across startups, and really across stages, depending, right? So you need to build systems and you need to think of multiple avenues to create revenue, even if you're still focusing on one particular ICP. It means different channels. It means doing the activity. So one of the things that we do in concert to kind of pair finance and go to market together is we have financial models to help you fundraise, and we also have models to help, like a lead gen model, like a growth model, if you will, right? And this all goes down into, depending on the channel, depending on introduction, right? You're gonna have different conversion ratios as you kind of go down through your pipeline to get to close, right? And that's gonna look a little bit different depending on your business, but the core of it is exactly the same, right? And it's a question of you got to put enough inputs in to get enough outputs out. It's as simple as that, right? And sometimes it's the hurdle, I would say, often is not the knowledge of what you have to do. It's actually carving out the time and taking the action to do it. And that's probably the behavior that we index on the most, right? If you need to hypothetically say, send 100 outbound messages a day, are you actually doing that? And when you wake up in the morning, are you motivated to do that? And right, it's that type of behavior and consistency that really is gonna equal success at the end. And I know we all in this modern world want immediate gratification. Sometimes in business development, you don't get that, so you got to stay motivated.
True. It's getting 1% better every day, taking a small
Yep.
step. Even if there are going to be days too where there are going to be days where maybe you take 10 steps when you're trying to drive pipeline and close deals. And then there are days and you feel amazing. And then there will be days where you take like one step. And you mentioned inputs. So everyone listening here, for the most part, is on the front lines building pipe, trying to close deals. What are inputs that people that we should be doing to make this happen?
Yeah, I think it all starts, I think, with maybe I'll put on my marketing hat and some traditional marketing exercises that people use, right? But, you need your value proposition kind of locked in. You need your ICP locked in. Um, right? And you need to constantly be validating that over and over and over again. So some of the tools, like you need to send outbound messages, you need to leverage LinkedIn, you need to leverage some of these other channels, but whether it's activity inputs, think of that, and then the inputs of the messaging, and being able to structure your outreach and your communications in a way where you're validating. So I wouldn't even go out to sell initially, right? Some of this at the very early stages is about saying, asking the question of, if I could do this, would you buy something like this? Right. And asking some of those simple questions. And even in your outreach, right, people don't want to be sold, right? So if you're like, hey, check out this great thing, it's going to solve your problems, it's quite presumptuous. Instead, maybe put on your humble hat a little bit, right? And in your initial outreach on some of this stuff, just ask like, hey, I got an idea. You're in this space as an expert, right? Can I just get 15 minutes of your time to run something by you? Ask for advice, right? And I think so it's you'll have all these different inputs, but then it's the nuance of how you message and position yourself that'll get kind of higher conversion rates to get that meeting, to get that call, to get that feedback, right? So there's a little bit of nuance there, and I think there's a lot of psychology that talks about this, but one of the quickest ways you can grow affinity with somebody is asking them for advice, right? Being humble, right? And then they have this stake, I guess, in you now, right? So it's a great way to build relationships. But I think ultimately at the early stages, what you're trying to do is build relationships, right? That's it. You're not selling. Selling is an outcome. And I think to your point there, Shane, some days you're going to have great outcomes and you're going to close a bunch of deals and sometimes you're not, right? That's the motivation part I was talking about. Like you can't get too excited when it works, and you can't get too discouraged when it doesn't. It's a matter of just staying consistent and thinking over the long term how that all is going to kind of even out.
So having a clear value prop, I love the approach of asking for advice because it takes the pressure off of you of selling something. Instead, you're asking for legitimate help. And also, I would say your you have to have that true heart posture because I think people can sort of feel that. Like, are you really asking for advice? So if you're, I think that's very, very powerful. And let's say like Anthony Usman, Timur here they have built the relationships are going, but the deals are stalling. What is causing these deal cycles to take so long right now, and how can we fix them?
Mhm. Well, I think it's first just understanding why is it stalled, right? And I think if you're in your sales process and ever are like questioning, like, I don't know why this happened, like, or why are they not responding to me anymore, or something like that, like you probably missed something earlier on. Maybe it's because they felt like they were sold, maybe to go back to that point, right? But I think it's also understanding your buyer and what motivates them, right? So the other piece of another input maybe is like traditional marketing used to do buyer personas, right? And you kind of build out like what makes people tick, right? And even in one particular organization, right? You're still selling to people at the end of the day, right? But you're also oftentimes the buying decision is not solely on one person's back, right? You're kind of selling a committee, or you're kind of have to drive some level of consensus. So it's understanding, and you have to do this throughout the entire relationship, but understanding what each of those people need in that sales cycle, um, kind of employing what I would call like kind of an account-based marketing, and kind of approaching each one of these deals from multiple angles. That way you don't have a single point of failure if you didn't hit the mark right, you still got another avenue. But it's also just like, again, going back to asking some just very direct questions, right? Like asking them when. When would you be willing to buy? Like maybe there's some buying cycles that you're unaware of, or maybe do a little more industry research there. Maybe there's people you're not talking to in that organization that ultimately hold the keys, right? And you're just talking to the wrong person. But I think people don't like asking direct questions, but sometimes in sales, like that is exactly what you need to do. Like, how much are you willing to pay? When would you want to make a decision? Who else in your organization should I be speaking with? And then I would also say, if you can get them on the phone and whatnot, one tactic you can always use is just like give them an open-ended question about like what can I do to help you make this decision? And then just being quiet and get comfortable with that silence, because the other party will also feel uncomfortable in that silence. And normally the first person to break and start talking is the one that, kind of gives in, if you will. So there's a lot of this like psychology about relationships and things that, um, seem really basic once you know and become very intuitive once you start practicing it, but it's really uncomfortable to start doing it if you're not used to it. So just getting over that mental block.
Yeah, such a great answer. I love that answer. And it's almost like you're saying with your prospects, if deals are stalling, that you should really focus on getting to the truth. even
Hmm.
if it even if it's uncomfortable. And it almost like to be great at closing pipe and to move the deals along, Adam, you're saying like to be comfortable and comfortable, like ask the direct questions that might feel strange, but you're doing it ultimately in service of the other person to help them reach their goal. And this isn't something that we plan for, but before we open it up for questions for everyone to ask, Adam, are you familiar with for these enterprise deals especially, are you familiar with something called like a change agent within a company? Like someone, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a background in enterprise as well, and I maybe call myself a self-proclaimed change agent, but these are your entrepreneurs, your innovators from within, right? The people that want to affect change. So it's the same DNA that an entrepreneur has, but maybe they don't have the risk tolerance to do it on their own, so they do it within an organization. But maybe another way of painting this for your audience too that would resonate is like an influencer. Like just like on social media, people follow people, right? Like who's the influencer within that organization? This is some of your CIA analysis, right? And understanding the different personas that make decisions and really understanding who you need to talk to and how you need to talk to them. But like I'm a big fan of efficient sales, right? So like channel partners and things like that. Like you need to employ all tactics, right? And the question becomes a matter of like allocation of time across all those tactics, not whether you do it at all, right? But these channel partners, these influencers will end up doing a lot of the work for you. You just need to enable them, harness the energy that they already bring to the table, empower them, maybe incentivize them a little bit, right? Depending what's legal or what's appropriate. Um, but that's exactly what you need to do, especially with lean teams, especially with lean budgets, right? Find the believers and then double down on those believers, like especially in the early stages. I think to also address the other point there about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, there's an old saying in sales, a no is just as valuable as a yes. And the quicker you can get to a no, you are not only respecting your own time, you're respecting the other person's time. And I think no one wants to be sold. It's more about how do you co-solve a problem together. And if there's no path to that solution, respectfully, don't waste each other's time anymore. And I think that also sends a really good brand signal and personal brand signal when you're very respectful of other people's time.
And also, you never know, they may jump to Ford or Microsoft in 3 months.
You got to keep doors open, right? You never want to be the guy that shuts it completely, right? Just timing. Timing, right? You can very easily with a lot of these targeting tools and marketing and sales tools like target demographics and firmographics and understand that. I think the harder thing, which is identifying those triggers and signals to understand when. When is the right time? When are they willing to listen? When will they have time in their day to really evaluate it? I get pitched all the time, really fascinating stuff. I just don't have time enough in my day to do enough research to see if I can actually, implement something into my existing workflows. Like the constraint is always time. So I think just index on efficiency, clarity, directness.
100%. One last question, and then we'll turn it to you guys. So have some questions ready that you want to come off mute and ask. We talked a little bit about how to advance deals. What are Let's say you're working a deal, you have your discovery call, it all goes good, you set up your demo. Like, what are maybe the top three green flags that this deal is significant and going to take shape? Like, what are the green flags that we should be looking for?
Mm, interesting. All right. So I would say number one, when I'm on the call, and it's harder in Zoom, I will say. Right, but in person you can absolutely see it, and I think it's the nonverbal is the first thing I kind of tee in on. So like example, I'm on my elbows, I'm kind of leaning in right now, right? I think eye contact matters. I think when people lean in versus sitting back, right? I pick up on a lot of body language that says they're actually interested in what I'm saying, and I'll change. I think part of what you also need to do in respectfulness is think on the fly, take some of those signals, and then change your pitch, right? Like you can't just read a script, especially if they're giving you negative body language. It's just gonna make it that much worse. So being able to adapt very quickly. But I think if they ask questions is a very clear one. The body language is a very clear one. And then on the sales call itself, I would say you always want to try to get a next step identified live on the call. Don't leave it for the follow-up. And if they're participative in booking the follow-up call, asking additional questions, if they're taking the lead on that, really, really, really good sign. If you're pulling teeth to try to get that next call, something's not right. And you have to like maybe step back, look at your meeting notes, whatever, think through, is it the right person? Like, but you have to identify it's all about continuous improvement, right? So don't just chalk it up as saying, wow, it didn't work out, right? Unpack it, think through, reflect, and be like, where did it go wrong? Where did I start noticing those things? How can I change that in the future? That's the key part of all this early stage stuff is you have to take the experimental mindset of this, right? And you're going to eventually come up with your own mental model of like pattern recognition, right? And you have to develop that yourself. Like you can take benchmarks and like look at other people's terms and stuff, but like your unique pitch, your unique value prop, the way people respond to that in the market, like, and you got to think through where did it go wrong, and then like how do you change one thing every single time? And as long as you adapt that chain, you said it at the outset, 1% change every single day, it compounds, right? That true, true, true. Sales and marketing is there's a playbook, there's some science to it, no doubt. But what makes things work is art, right? It's some of that nuanced and like non-quantifiable stuff, right? That really is the difference between success and failure.
True. And just continuing to go and resilience and pushing on. There's so much more that we could talk through. Usman, Timur, Anthony, you guys joined the call. You're working deals right now. Someone come off mute and maybe share something you're wrestling with, stuck on. Like, let's dig into something interesting and compelling for each of you.
I can start if you want. Right now, I would say since the last time we talked, Shane, I've really been doubling down on diplomatic outreach. So speaking with, you know, ambassadors, defense attaches, people at that level. And all those meetings went great in the sense of I went in, I did a lot of background research on exactly what's the history, the geopolitical situation, the financial capital markets position of these countries. And that built a lot of rapport because, especially the smaller countries, are surprised that I put in that much effort to understand where they're coming from and what they're thinking about and what they're concerned about. And that part goes well. The difficulty I'm finding is in the phase where they say, oh, cool. Can you give us a follow up deck that we can share with our ministry back in our capital? And then we do. And it seems like there's a gap there where something goes off the wire, where usually the response is, oh, we don't have the money, but hold on, we're working on it. Let's see what we can do. But we might have to wait until the next budget cycle. Or, I was sort of cold reaching out to, well, not cold, but I would get warm leads from friends that work at defense contractors, not just US, but also international. Same deal. Did a lot of research on their market position, their pain points, presented our solution, but then they'd say, this is so innovative. I need to find the right person to share this with. And then the momentum dies.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, Budget cycles, do you think you mentioned that on the budget cycle? Do you think that is a valid reason, or do you think that is just lip service on that particular example?
So there's a couple where I know for sure because I know the countries well and I've engaged with these people for like years now, like in the sense that these are like maybe not friends, but I've
Sure.
known them and they trust me to tell me this stuff. I know for a
Sure.
fact that some of them actually, yes, there are budget concerns, but for
Okay.
some I can't tell.
Okay.
And I suspect that for some it is just lip service.
I think that's a key kind of way to bifurcate those people first and foremost. And I think if you think they're genuine, you have to respond in kind, right? You cannot be pushy because people don't want to be closed. People don't want to be sold to, like, period. So I think it's like that's the respect piece. If they're telling you that, then I think it's just as simple as saying, well, when can I follow up with you next? When do you think the timing is right for us to re-engage? Like you have to take them at face value, I think, at some point too, right? Like, I would say if you're skeptical of some of that stuff, I think the other thing I'm hearing is that, you're talking to an ambassador, maybe some of the leaders in this organization. Uh, what would say some of their support teams look like? Like how many staffers do they have? How many other people are supporting their efforts?
For UN missions where there's an ambassador leading the UN engagement, it's generally pretty small.
Okay.
So I would say 10 is a good average size. There are a
Okay.
couple countries that have a shoestring budget. And then there's the US or Germany that have like thousands of people or
Fair.
hundreds of people. Um, those people, I think, are more exposed to some of this budgetary stuff because I think a lot of these ministries back in their capitals think, well, it's just the UN. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
As opposed to defense attaches in DC. Well, I know for a fact that there were three meetings that I had that went phenomenal. And these people were clearly what you were saying based on the body language were like, heck yeah. And
Yeah.
somebody in the capitals must have said, I don't see the value add.
Yeah. Well, maybe. Maybe these people are busy, right? They're hopping from meeting to meeting to meeting. I think their biggest constraint's probably time. So they might have been genuinely like very interested in your thing, but they're also balancing 20 other things every single day. So maybe it's just not on the priority list for them to take action next. They might very much believe in it, but it's like, how do you get them to take action? I think maybe some of this is like a lot of assumptions, clearly, right? Not knowing each one of these accounts, but um I would actually ask them on the call if they're showing interest, like who else on your team can I work with? Like they're going to pass it off to somebody else anyways. Why don't you preempt that and say, who else on your team can I work with on the details of this? Get another point of contact there, right? And if they ask you follow-up questions like, well, who would be best, then you can start, giving some of those attributes of the people that, somebody that's passionate about this, someone that works closely with you, someone that carries a little bit of influence in your organization, you know, there's a little bit of education you have to do, right? But I think it's what we said. It's find that influencer, find that other person that actually does not have that constraint that your kind of main point of contact has.
Very helpful. Thank you. I just had to sneeze.
Yeah, yeah. Bless you.
And also the person who can potentially sign off as well and say yes,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
decision maker. Man, I can't tell you how many times out of my chase deals because I saw like the positive signals, the positive body language, and then when push came to shove, when we had to have the direct conversation that you're talking about, it fell apart because ultimately I didn't ask enough questions to see whether or not they were the actual decision maker. Do you have any tips on like how do we make sure we're selling to the right people? It's like you want to go on the road trip to the right destination. You don't want to end up in the wrong spot.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to answer this in this way. Um, Go into these calls and like in consulting, right? There's the consult or even in law firms, right? There's discovery, right? I think on your introductory calls, don't sell anything. Don't even try to pitch a solution, right? I think that's preempting and making some vast assumptions. I think the best thing you can do, and some of this is about growing affinity with the person on the other side of the table too, is just ask a bunch of open-ended questions. Gather as much information as you possibly can. I would even argue, depending on obviously the sale, I wouldn't even show a deck. I wouldn't pitch anything on that first call. I would just ask questions and gather as much information as you can. Um, if you try to solve it on the call, you're not going to see the whole picture. Like, say, I'll follow up with you later this week. Give yourself some time to reflect, to look at your notes, to come up with, I heard what you said, and here's the pain points that you're dealing with, and here's how our solution can focus on solving that pain point. I think we also when we're selling products, we're so close to it. We see all these benefits, right? And you just want to get it across. You just don't understand, right? Like I can give you benefit and value here, 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 right? But people don't buy like that, right? People buy because they have an acute pain in one area, right? And they just want to solve that one thing. They know they have these other problems, but again, time is the constraint. They don't have enough time to think about how am I going to solve that. So they're trying to just you can't sell an all-in-one, right? You just get your foot in the door, solve a pain point, provide some value. What that does is it builds trust. And only once that trust is there can then you think about the expansion, right? And all these other things. But, you know, keep some of those things in your back pocket, right? Because I think there's this other concept of like, surprise them, right? Find little moments and pockets of value that'll like implant you and your product in the buyer's mind. Because ultimately, what you're competing for is mind share, right? Going back to this. So you don't want to be greedy and try to jam too much in there, right? You got to kind of meet them where they are. But you also want to kind of drip this out on them so you stay top of mind over time. That, Anthony, is how like you have this long buying cycle potentially, right? It's not about going radio silent for 9 months until, the fiscal year's up, right? It's what are the appropriate touch points in between there to say that I'm still thinking about you, and then in return, you're giving them some little snippet of value. That way you're top of mind. So when 9 months do come up, right, you're still in the consideration. That's all we're trying to do is still be considered, right?
And Shane talked about products, such a great answer, by the way. A lot of like the products, it can be confusing, it can be difficult to articulate them. How, like, if we're trying to sell something complex, especially maybe in some cases it's still an MVP,
Hmm.
like, how do we simplify our message? You mentioned value proposition. How do we simplify something complex in the sales process?
That's tough. We deal with this a lot, right? Because a lot of innovation is like net new, right? You're changing paradigm, and then that means you need to educate. That's hard. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's where not being presumptuous that you know the solution out of the gate really matters. So being humble. I think taking both a top-down and bottom-up approach really matters there because you need, I mean, obviously there's different types of products all over the day, right? But you need the practitioners, the ones that are using this thing or benefiting from this thing on a daily basis. They need to buy in, right? And then you also need the top-down decision makers to understand the value it's going to drive, maybe on the bottom line or on some, mission-aligned outcome, right? You need to hit both of those things because what you're not privy to oftentimes is the committee structure that ends up formulating to be like, hey, did you talk to Shane? Did you see the product? What did you think? What did you think? What did you think? So you got to think that that's going to happen. So how do you get everyone to kind of align around that? I think that's one of the key ways you could probably solve that.
Yeah. And when in doubt, just keep it simple.
Yeah, just focus, that's where it is. It's again, you can't share every benefit, right? Just the ones that are going to resonate the most, right? Like there's this old psychological thing too. It's like you have I think they talk about this in law quite a bit, right? It's like you got 10 points to make, right? And like, but not all 10 points are equally as strong, right? The most convincing and persuasive way to do it is say your one really rock solid, undisputable point, and then shut up. Let them discover some of the other stuff than themselves, but you're going to dilute your argument if you start going off of like on number three and number five. And then what people are going to do is they're going to find one little hole and they're going to poke the hole and it's going to destroy your entire value prop.
Very true. A question in here is, you might be selling a solution, but what does it look like for the buyer? Right. They're living in a little bit of a different world. Can you describe for someone who's trying to understand what market pull and product push is and market push and pull, like, can you break that
Yeah.
down for us?
Sure, sure, sure. I mean, market pool is ultimately what we all want, right? When demand is just so great that they're pining for your product. That's always a great outcome and a great signal to kind of drive toward. Um, and it is also a signal to saying you found product market fit, right? Your value prop resonates. When you start to see the market pool is when I think you really want to scale up. So I was talking a little bit at the outset about this experimental mindset, and you have to continue to experiment, right? Experiment, see what works, right? You don't want to scale too early, right? And you're going to kind of like reduce the your addressable market a little bit potentially, right? But once you see the market pool and the demand, like inbound is one signal you can probably look for, and people asking for more meetings, right? That's a great success signal. Product push, right? And maybe what you see in a market pool is a little bit more of like product-led growth strategies, right? If you structure your team like that, you start, right? The product kind of speaks for itself, right? Product push is much more like, we're pushing it out to the market. A lot of people start with product push. That's, I think, where we're doing some of this experimental stuff is we're trying to push it out and testing to see where it is. But when you're pushing product, it's not as scalable and it's not as efficient, right? From a growth model standpoint. Now, I think you're going to do both, especially for companies as you continue to scale and have multiple solutions and multiple products. You're always going to be doing a little bit of both, right? I don't think it's not like an either or by any means. Um, right. But I do see an allocation kind of shift. And right. And I think that's one of those big signals you can say that I've hit the mark. Now is when I can pour more resources into whatever is working and really ramp up the volume.
The market pool, that's what we're all after.
Yeah, 100%.
It's
100%.
it's iterative too. I believe that each of you can get that. It just takes time. It takes like compounding the things that Adam's talking about today, and they all build on one another. And just to go back to you said sales process everywhere. I just simplify things. If we zoom out, like you said, discovery call, what are the specific steps? Are there like 3 steps, 5 steps? What are the steps in a process, in a B2B process that a founder or someone who's selling at an early stage startup should like follow? Any blueprint or tips you have on that?
Yeah, I think, I'm asked this question a lot about like what is the B2B, sales playbook? And the reality is, if I find one playbook that's universal to all, it's so high level, it's not really truly actionable. Um, so there is something that is a little bit custom to understanding your buyer and your particular product and who needs to kind of weigh in on that. Because the other thing you're not trying to do is just not trying to sell. You're also trying to make sure that adoption is there post sale, right? Otherwise, they're going to churn, right? So I think even in the sales, you got to think a little bit further than that. Um, but I would say kind of like the key things you need to think about is, right, because information is at our fingertips, not just with the web, but now with AI, right? um, People do more and more due diligence on their own before they ever reach out to you. So I think the step one is an anonymous engagement with your brand, right? So I think content marketing as a general thing is evolving quite a bit, right? And I would say content marketing is still important. It just takes different forms and it needs to be very specific to hit on very specific points. But that's where it starts. Some anonymous interaction with your brand, right? In various marketing channels and various types of content and various webinars and podcasts that you join, right? At some point, you have to have a conversion mechanism. An example of that is just a web form, right? Where that anonymous traffic, information, engagement then converts to a known person, right? And I think a lot of that stuff is where that top of funnel stuff is a lot where AI is going to be very helpful for these startup companies to really like expedite and get the message out there and test and iterate and see what's working and resonating and driving more inbound. There's a little bit of like kind of the market pool on an ICP standpoint. Um, I think where it's a lot more nuanced is your individual sales process. And that's where your sales team kind of comes in once that first meeting is made. And I always use meetings made as a great, like, kind of leading indicator KPI, right? But then the question is really like, what is your sales track? What is your sales process? What is your proposal generation process? Like, what's onboarding look like? In that sales process, there's a lot of expectation setting that happens, not just selling, right? Because again, you want to make sure the onboarding is successful, that you can deliver exactly what you sell for. That who knows, right? I mean, that could be a timing thing. It could be multiple touch points, multiple meetings, demos. I would just encourage everyone on the first meeting, don't hawk your product, don't hawk your solution. Just do the discovery. Only after you truly understand and ask follow-up questions to validate your understanding, repeat back to the person, this is what I heard. Is that right? Right? Saying things like that drives a lot of confidence that you're actively listening. I think that's a huge signal you can sell that'll pay dividends in the back end. And then I don't think you pitch right away. You schedule the follow-up call to then come to the solution. Even in the sense of like, I got to think about it. I got to consult with other people on my team. I got to, interview somebody else. And then I think when you come back to present, sharing some of the validation work you've done, right? I think those are some key sentiments you want to get across to the person on the other side of the table is that You researched Anthony. I love that. That sends a great signal. Um, and even on the kickoff the next call, like asking questions like, hey, have you thought about anything new that you need to tell me from the last call? Like always seek to understand and learn more. And I think that that is the most positive signal you can say because we're all early stage companies. And I think being humble enough to say we don't have it all figured out, right? But enlisting people to work on the same side of the table as you, we're going to co-solve this problem. I've got this solution, but I don't think I've got the full answer here. I need people like you. Involving them in the process, I think, is a huge, huge thing, right? Because you're going to, again, going back to what I said at the beginning, constantly listening for the voice of the customer, constantly iterating, constantly pivoting. And I think people are very, it's easy to make a close when they know that you're going to pivot and adapt with them, right? Because then you're going to be seen as a partner and not a vendor. And I think that's ultimately kind of like what you need to get to. And then we call it RevOps, and marketing is always the best at kind of combining this stuff. But I think organizationally in the process, what you want to do is show continuity between the handoffs between these traditional teams. So if they've given you some information on the marketing side, making sure in the sales process you're, reiterating what you learned about them already. And then when they close and they're starting to onboard, make sure that everything that was captured in the sales process, their goals, their outcomes, their pain points, the onboarding team knows. And I think just making that's more of an internal thing, but making sure, I mean, maybe it's one person at your stage with the founder, but as you grow, making sure you have those processes in place to make sure there's consistency in that sales experience from the other user's end. You got to put yourself in their shoes, right? They're going to put an immense amount of trust and faith in you to build something that might not be exactly there today, but if they have confidence that you're the right team to get there with them, that's what's going to close your deals.
Very true. And it's a win-win-win. When you listen, you get more info. You can customize your demo to what their needs, pain points are, and they feel heard.
That's it. People just want to be heard.
That's awesome. All right. Usman, I'm going to come to you as just as we wrap up the conversation. What's your question? And for context, Adam, Usman's the CEO of a company that's doing work on the cutting edge of AI and negotiation.
A
Nice.
really interesting conversation. I hope you guys can hear me. I really appreciate the discovery and really this idea of thinking of transform the relationship to one of being on the same side of the table and being partners. We're early stage, and we are following some of your playbook in our own sort of improvisational way. We're getting to a stage where we're crafting proposals, so we know what's needed, what we can offer. We've gone through our pitch, and there's a good fit. And because we're early stage, and we're trying to validate also the business model. So this is the challenge as an early stage. We're now getting to the, I won't say guessing, but modeling around pricing, willingness to pay. Our business model is platform fees plus, FDE or expert solution, sort of we're a technology company, but we offer embedded or alongside human advisory that really makes that work. Similar to what other AI platform companies are doing for enterprise. And we've been told by some of our advisors that our pricing is we're lowballing it, and we need to be not just getting customer success stories in these early design partners or pilot partners, but heading into eventually a future seed raise. We want to have market validation on our business model, on our revenue model, and at what point or what's the right way to test the waters on willingness to pay without, like, because once you throw out a number or you start guessing, it's like, okay, well, what's going on, and is there any art for that? Because I don't think just asking open-ended questions gives you what you want. And we have our proposal. Our move is first. No one tells you here's what we're willing to pay. They're going to see it in our proposal, and so besides benchmarking and thinking about the value we create, we want to make sure that we're giving value for partners that are betting on us early, right? So I think there's a kind of but we don't want to set a precedent with these customers that might be long term. And at the same time, we do really want to test the willingness to pay in the market. And we have like three shots at that
Mm,
before, like three early customers is what we're focused on.
got it. me just take some notes here real quick. Okay, so these advisors, your follow-up question, are they on the capital side or are they operator advisors?
Oh, so both of them are former clients actually, but they and C-suite clients, but we're offering an AI solution now. So they
Okay,
they are they are former literally customers for what humans would have done, consultants would have done in this space.
got it. So they're being displaced, I guess, in some ways.
No, so they're not being displaced. We're enhancing the service delivery, so it's human
Got it.
plus AI, right?
Got
But
it.
these are former clients. They think we lowball it. They've benchmarked it
Got
against
it.
what a
So,
6 month delivery with McKinsey would be, and what you're delivering, right?
yep, got it. Got it. Got it. So if I unpack their persona, they see this as a complementary tool, but that will also be part of their business, which makes them money, correct?
Yeah. So the value we create or protect is many multiples what we charge.
Yep, yep. All right. I would, you're always going to get the push for revenue. And I am the first to say we absolutely need to meet them where they are. But I would also say with three customers out there, you're still in build phase. And especially with your early adopters, especially if you're getting feedback from them, it's not just the case study you mentioned, but like if you're getting product feedback from them
Yep.
and real market insight on them, um, you cannot lose them. So um, don't try to monetize those initial relationships as much. I think you always want to be on that left side of the value curve. Always make sure that they're getting more value than they're paying for early on, right? Those will translate into future value with other customers if you can iterate the product and figure out what that actual solution is. Um, how do you test pricing? I think there's a couple different ways you could probably get around it. I mean, with three people, experimenting isn't enough, but maybe there's some leading indicator pricing stuff you can do with A/B testing on like general outreach. So if you do any kind of content messaging and things like that stuff. We can find some proxies on like an A/B test on a landing page with two different pricing models just to see maybe who stays on the page longer, who goes, maybe you lead with some emails and just test the market that way. But try to figure out some ways to see if like, are they even interested? Like, that's not to say they'll buy, right? But like, does the pricing model resonate? I think another thing that we do at FinStrat is often going back to the asking for advice stuff. So if we know your ICP, there's this validation process that we employ where we will basically um, create let's call it an R&D type letter. Like we are building something, you're in this space, and we will just conduct interviews as a third party, not you. So you really get away from this idea of like, this is a sales call because again, people don't want to be sold to. So we're going to go into it and just interview and validate and ask questions. And is this solving a thing? And by using like third parties, you kind of distance yourself from it. But we will ask those types of questions, right? Directly. How much you're willing to pay. I think it's interesting when I think about pricing when you're additive versus like there's a lot of AI tools and agentic stuff out there right now that is basically trying to take the FTE labor cost and using that as kind of the basis for the pricing model. I'm debating whether that is the right way to go about it. Because what you just said, right? If you price it that way, then the implication is that you're replacing people. But what you just said is that you're not replacing people. This is additive to the delivery, making them more efficient. So I think you need a completely different pricing model than proxying on like labor cost. Um, but definitely, I think there's multiple ways to kind of get to it. But I'm also going to go back to just saying like asking a direct question, right? Being transparent and building with that person, with those three, right? And if you're uncomfortable doing it, like hire someone like FinStrat, we'll do it for you.
That's great. Yeah, very much appreciate it. It's design partners, so we're not treating them as the monetization as much as sort of validation
Got it.
and each of these clients helps build the product, literally, or the combination of the value we're trying to create.
Yeah.
Helpful. We learn our way forward, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe. if you share more with like with those three design partners, maybe they can give you like some of the clients they've served in the past, right? If they're in this space, maybe that's a way you could just get a list and just say, hey, could you make a quick introduction? Or maybe here's depending, right? Maybe it's just a quick survey. Hey, can you take a couple of these questions, right? Like you're who we're trying to target, but it's all about the messaging, just painting it as we're doing market research, right? And I think especially if it's kind of a second degree connection or what, people want to help. I think human nature is they want to help people, right? So if you lead with this idea that like I am seeking your expertise in this space, I think it gets through a little bit more, right?
Right.
True. And for a founder who doesn't know on how to price out their product, Adam, what do you think about engaging and asking to this sort of the spirit of the I'm hearing from the conversation today is like ask questions. What about asking them something like, well, like let's work together to quantify how much this actually moves the needle for you. And then you have like an ROI and then you work backwards.
Yeah.
Would that be unwise that early in the process, or just ask directly, like, hey, what does this actually work to you guys? Let's have an honest heart-to-heart conversation.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to approach it. That's exactly it. I think you got to do both. It's the value creation and being able to model what that value is, right? Understanding what it's driving in the company. The problem is like if you then market the value-based pricing as such, right? Sometimes that value is not a direct line item on like the budget, right? Sometimes it's like a opportunity cost or unrealized cost or something like that, right? Drives efficiency. Those are always really hard, but it's a great place to start to get into the ballpark, I would say. I think the other side of this is more the psychology of what people are buying. And that's where you've got to really understand where they're starting from. What is their frame of reference? Because what you're pitching to them is maybe something innovative and unique that they've never bought before, right? Going back to the educational thing. So you have to like maybe that part of the interview questions, right? Is understanding like, here's really a vague description. What do you think that would replace in your tech stack or in your process today, right? Because you have to understand where they're anchoring. And then once you understand that, then you can kind of come at it from that low end and then come at it from the value end. And normally the answer is somewhere in the middle.
And also, I love that you just said it's a hypothetical. You're not saying like, yeah, our product's going to come in and replace three of your products. You're saying, hey, hypothetically, how would this look today?
Yeah. Yep.
So
Now
good.
on like consumer, direct to consumer stuff, obviously you have sample sizes much bigger where you can run a lot more experimentation, right, with conversions and things like that. But B2B, you're right. It is a little bit more hypothetical. It's a little bit more thought exercise, right? But just don't isolate yourself in that thought exercise is the best advice I can give.
100%. 100%. All right, let's wrap up today. I'll put in the chat one more time, link to connect with Adam and FinStrat. Adam, before we do a recap, could you share briefly a founder is driving, they're working hard, time is everything. They're doing a million different things, wearing different hats, and then they come across FinStrat. What does FinStrat do to help founders elevate their business and take things to the next level?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. So FinStrat Management, first and foremost, we are a partner to early stage companies. We work with companies everywhere from around the pre-revenue, but close to, maybe you've gotten a safe note stage up through about Series B, Series C. But we exclusively focus on early stage companies to drive fundraising and get you investor ready or to help you scale and grow. Those are the two outcomes we try to drive. We do that through, first and foremost, outsourced fractional accounting and finance. So a very cost-effective way to level up your accounting to make sure that you're GAAP compliant, you're using accrual accounting, or maybe the other things the investors want to see, right? And you have clean financials. Really important because investors won't always give you actionable feedback. They might just say, well, not a right fit, not the right time, right? So that's some of the work that we do. But I also, just for example, lead our go-to-market practice. And we have a number of other practices that we're maturing at the time. So one way to think about us is like an asynchronous accelerator. We can pair you with cheap legal, right? Cheap as cost, but still very experienced, right? We've pre-negotiated banking with JP Morgan that we can pass on value to our founders. We help with outsourced HR and recruiting. We even have, I would even argue, a back office engineering team that will help make sure that your back office is run really efficiently. So we do all of these things to surround this, support the founder, so that you, the founder, can focus simply on product and your growth. It's about freeing up your time, and the founders that need index on speed, gain market share, do something quick are the perfect fits for us.
So good. This is like exactly what I wish I had when I was building, and this is why I'm so excited and so thankful you came on today, Adam, and also that we're going to be working together this summer, starting in May on the accelerator. It's going to be so fantastic. You mentioned accelerator. It's like you're helping companies drive revenue, get investor ready, but also you have a whole other suite of options and possibilities for them to plug into, and it's almost like you can work with the founder and help them pick out what like okay yeah you don't need HR right now but you might need some legal right now like that is just like that guidance that support from like a single sort of source would have been game changing, and so I'm so stoked to be doing this with you and doing it together. I wanted to just run through a couple things that Adam said today that I thought were amazing, and then we'll wrap up the show. He said follow a clear sales process, test multiple revenue channels, a really huge emphasis on getting customer feedback early and often, preferably, and asking prospects for advice, not just a sale. I think that that's so, so true and brilliant. And get to the truth. Don't be pushy, but be respectful and ask questions. And if you do just two of those things, I know all of you are doing all of them the best that you can, but just a couple of those done really well, you can close pipeline faster, get investor ready, and hopefully break this um, thought that's out there in the market that it's hard to be fundraising. I'm believing that piece tech companies and companies that work with FinStrat will flip that paradigm, and it'll be smooth and an easy and actually an enjoyable fundraising process when you have all of these nailed down. So, Adam, so thankful for you to be here. I want to give you the last word. Where can we find you, connect with you from here to go forward?
Yeah, we're active on LinkedIn. That's a great place to find me. Reach out to me directly. You can also check out our website. It's finstratmgmt.com. And I would also encourage everyone to check out, we have a podcast called the Innovators and Investors Podcast, hosted by our CEO and founder, Christian Marquez. But it really shows our, breadth of relationships across both the investor and founder ecosystems.
Incredible. All right, we'll link to each of those three in the show notes, and of course, we're gonna talk again very, very soon. I'm so grateful for you, such good insights, and the next 5 minutes for all of you listening to this call are the best 5 minutes. Take something that Adam shared today and apply it to your sales process, to your conversations, and see what happens.
Thanks so much for having me on, Shane. This was a wonderful conversation, and it's great meeting you all.
It flew by, it flew by. All right, we'll catch everyone in the next episode, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.